I'm sitting here at the Phillips 66 on South Gessner, where I made the report sitting on the other side of the building earlier to CPS that Cynthia threatened to rape my son. And I'm charging my cell phone right there at the charging port. And I started thinking about my son. He was breastfeeding, and I would look down at him, and he would turn and look at me and smile while he was nursing. And when he woke up from a nap, he'd go, "Ma." Well, Austin was in prison. He'd go, "Ma." And I go in there, and he was smiling. He was always happy. And I started to cry because I said, I don't even have anywhere to mourn her threatening to rape my child. I don't have anywhere in private to cry for my son. And I just started to cry, and then I thought about God being with me the whole time, and I said, "God, thank you for not turning your back on me in the jail and being with me the whole time. And thank you for not saying that I was guilty for shooting Austin in the leg." God told me when they brought me into the segregated housing unit where they tried to murder me for several months pregnant. The first night that they brought me into the segregated housing unit, God told me that I was not guilty, and that my two sisters were in bed with Ingrid Chandler and the women in the court to cover up why I shot the gun in the air in the restaurant. And that I was pregnant, and I was just thinking God said I wasn't guilty, and so I started talking to God. And I was like, "Thank you for not turning your back on me." And I just started talking to him, and then I was like, because when somebody is bullying you and you shoot them, I talked to God, and I said that Austin was bullying me in my home, and I said, when somebody is bullying your child, I told God, I said, I felt like Austin was trying to hurt my son to hurt me, because he wanted to hurt me. And so he started punching him and just doing things to my baby. He was only 22 months, and he bullied me from my home with my baby in my arms, and he was robbing me, and he was bullying my son and me in the apartment, and he was pushing my baby and making him hit his head and beating me up in front of my baby. And my baby was running up to him and hitting him, and he didn't even know what was going on, but he knew that I was his mother, and I had raised him, and Austin had just got out of prison attacking me in front of him, and he had ran up to Austin and started hitting him, and Austin pushed him and made him hit his head. And I got angry, and I had missed my period and knew that I was pregnant with this baby, and I was angry that he pushed Melby and made him hit his head on the ground. And I asked him, why did he do that to Melbourne? And he said that I made him do it. The argument was because Austin and I had we had smoked some weed together when he was released, and he had been drinking, and I found out that I was pregnant. And I told Austin that I did not want to smoke any cigarettes or anything, and that I couldn't have it in the house around Melbourne because they would take him from us. And I told him I was pregnant and I needed to lie down, and that I would not engage with smoking or anything because of the pregnancy. And Austin went into my purse and started to steal my money to get drugs, but the drugs that he wanted was not marijuana. It was drugs that I did not do, and he was stealing my money. And I went in there and I asked Austin not to do that. And that's when he got physical with me, when he was going into my purse. And I was just trying to lie down and be pregnant, and I didn't want to party or do anything. And this was in my home, and he assaulted my child during him assaulting me. And I wanted to hit him. I wanted to fight him back, but I couldn't because I knew that I was pregnant, and I could just see in Austin's eyes that he didn't care after he hit Mel B and then blamed me for it and made him hit his head like that. And Melbourne had never been abused. I never even had to spank him. He was only 22 months old, and he did not know why he was being abused. And he looked up at me, and I looked at my baby, and I felt like I let him down by letting Austin do that to him. And he hadn't done anything to Austin. He was only 22 months old. He hadn't done anything for him to make Mel B fall back and hit his head like that. And when I looked at my baby looking at me, like, why did he just do this to me? I wanted to fight Austin and defend myself, because he still continued to try to attack me, ramming me into the walls in my son's bedroom where he did this, because he went into the closet through my son's bedroom where my purse was and started going and stealing the money out of my purse and the keys to the vehicle that was given to me for me and my son while he was in prison. And I wanted to defend myself, but I thought to myself, if I do defend myself, then he gonna hurt me worse, and he gonna kill this baby. And that's the only thought that went in my mind, is that he was gonna kill this baby in my body. And I didn't fight back physically, like to punch him back. And there have been several altercations where I never punched him back, but because he had did it to my son, I was still doing it to me in front of my son, I wanted to fight him back, but I was pregnant and I knew that I was, and I didn't want him to kill the baby, so I didn't fight back, and he fled. And I called the police department and told them that he assaulted me and that he stole my money in my vehicle and fled to Cynthia's. But this was the first time that Melbourne had fell and hit his head. I didn't tell the police department that Mel B fell and hit his head, but I did tell them that I didn't want him in the home and that he was assaulting me. And so he had done it again and was attacking me in my kitchen, and I was afraid of the knives and things in the environment. And my son ran up on him again and started hitting him, and he turned to Mel B and did the same thing he did in the bedroom, and he pushed him down on his head and made him hit his head on the floor in the kitchen. And I was like, you just up here just abusing my baby. And I was cooking in the kitchen for Mel B to have some food to eat, because I always cook for him. And Austin went and ate up all the food that I had cooked for my son. And I said, why did you do that? This was for him. And you don't put yourself before the child that I cooked for. I cooked for him. I'm going to feed him. You ate all of the food from this child. and he got angry, and he knew that that was my son's, and it seemed like he just had something against my son. And I made my son something. I started making him some food after Austin ate his dinner, and my son started climbed up on the recliner chair in the living room. I have pictures of the recliner chair on my channel that Cynthia and them had given to me while Austin was in prison, and I didn't want them, but they insisted that I take it and not get my own furniture, and have since used that to go in the courtroom and say, you could take my son because of some furniture that you gave me, and you had no right to do that. And so my son had climbed up on this recliner chair while I was cooking, and I saw him. But because his dad was there, because Austin was there, I asked Austin. I said, Austin was trying to pick a fight with me because I had said something about him eating my son's dinner, and that it was selfish for him to have done that because he's a child, and he was drunk when he did it, and he was still drunk, stumbling around, and I was afraid that he would attack me again. And I was a little afraid, but I asked him, I was like, instead of trying to pick a fight with me, why don't you get your son down from the recliner chair so he does not hurt himself? And Austin went over to the recliner chair, and he just shoved it like that, and my baby went flying off the couch and hit his head on the ground and was screaming and crying. And so I ran up to Austin, but there was another incident where he I heard him punch my son around the same day. It was like the same day where I heard Austin punch him in the back. And when somebody punches somebody in the back, you can hear it. And he punched my baby in the back. And he was 20 months old when Austin got out of prison July 10, 2018 for assault. And all of this happened between July 2018 up until September 18, 2018 when I shot him. And he punched my baby in the back, and I went up to, I said, don't punch I said, did you punch my baby? He said, oh, it was an accident. I said, no, that was not no accident. I heard how hard you punched him. And he looked just like Austin, and he was so small and skinny and cute, and he wasn't even 2 years old. And he punched my baby that he didn't raise, that he didn't give birth to, that he almost killed while I was pregnant with him. And I asked him why he punched my baby, and he said that it was an accident and that he didn't mean to punch him that hard, that they were playing, but my son was not playing with him when he just punched my baby in the back. And my son is very high yellow, and he punched my baby. And so I got upset, and I said, Austin, you're not allowed to put your hands on him. If you're saying you're whooping him or disciplining him about anything, come to me and tell me what he did. And then we'll go and discipline him accordingly as parents together. If it warrants for a whooping or a spanking, then you have to go through me first and tell me what he did. And I said, you are not to hit him at all. And that might have made him feel like he didn't have the right to discipline his son, but Melbourne was not being bad, and he kept trying to whoop him. He kept trying to hit him for stuff, and he wasn't doing nothing wrong. I never had to hit him. He was a perfectly behaved child. He wasn't even at the age for nobody to be hitting him. And so when he pushed him off of the recliner chair, it was after he had punched him, and I had already told him not to hurt Melbourne. And I had the police called on Austin. He was throwing objects at my son when he was only 3 weeks old, trying to flip him out of a stroller at 5 weeks old. And I called the police because he was ransacking our home and being violent. And he was arrested and went to prison and claimed that he was going to come back in and not abuse us again. And started out doing it the first week. And then got me pregnant again. And was raping me in my home and hitting me while pregnant with this baby. And they all lying about it. Everybody that I thought loved me or cared and threatened to rape my baby. And so he pushed him off of the recliner chair, and I watched him do it. Because I asked him to get him down while I was cooking. And he got mad at me because of how I said it. And went over there and I said, Austin, instead of trying to pick a fight with me, because he was trying to start fights with me drunk while I was cooking for my son in the kitchen. And we have been living fine with him gone. But because Joseph and Cynthia was helping pay the rent, Austin was envious and wanted to come in and mess up my home and stop us from having anywhere to live without him, and didn't want Cynthia and Joseph helping us so that I would end up on the streets, and wanted them to end up with the baby, and they turned out to be child molesters. So back to him pushing my baby off of the chair. So he went up to the chair and he was drunk, and then boom. And I asked him, I said, why don't you get my son? I said, why don't you get our son down from the recliner chair before he gets hurt? And he went over to the chair and pushed it. And my son went flying and hit his head on the ground. And that was the main reason for me asking Austin to go and get him down off of the chair, was so he would not get hurt. And he went over and pushed my baby off of the chair and made him fly off and hit his head. If that was the case, I wouldn't even ask you to touch him and let him fall down and get hurt himself. And when my baby landed on the ground and started screaming, Austin ran up to him trying to pretend like, oh, it was an accident, I didn't mean to do it. I watched him do it. And I was still pregnant, and I ran up to Austin while he was over there trying to act like he cared about my baby being crying on the floor, crying on the ground. I ran up to him and I balled up both of my fists. And I said, it's a side of me that you do not want to see. And I said it like that. I told him. Because I have never protected myself from Austin when he was abusing me before I got pregnant with Melbourne, while I was pregnant with Melbourne, and after I gave birth to Melbourne. The only thing I did was try to protect Melby when he tried to hurt Melby when he was a newborn. Then it started to get to where I was having to grab Austin and try to sling him away from hurting my son, and I had to just get him out of the house by the time Melby was 5-6 weeks old. And Cynthia and Austin pretty much begged me to let him come back in my home at 1308 Houston Street, and she begged me not to file for child support so that I could get help through the state to help me pay for bills and get me qualified for different programs and HUD and things like that. They wouldn't give me stuff without reporting where the father was and that he was in prison and that I needed their assistance. And they wanted me to press charges on Austin and file to put him on child support, and Cynthia did not want me to do that and said that she would help me and that Austin would get counseling. And then he came into my home attacking me and my son. And I told Austin when he did that, and I said, because at that point, you done pushed my son off of a chair at 22 months old and drunk. And I said, Austin, because he had been hitting him several times, that was like the third time that he had made Melbourne hit his head in my home. And he had punched on him and kept trying to hurt him. And I said, Austin, it's a side of me that you don't want to see. And I was going to punch the living daylights out of him. But I was pregnant as well, and I knew that they were trying to say that if I hit Austin, he bruised, and they could hurry and take me to jail and cover up that he was in my home abusing me and my son. So I didn't hit him when he did that to Melbourne, but I warned him that it was a side to me that he didn't want to see. But I had no intentions of shooting him, but I didn't want to have to fight him in my home about my son, because he almost made me steal off on him and punch him a few times when he knocked my baby down off of that chair. And I knew that they was going to arrest me and take me to jail, and I warned him that it's a side of me that you do not want to see about you keep hitting on my baby up in this house. And I was talking to God, and I was crying and saying, God, thank you for having my back. And I told God, I said, Austin was bullying me in my home, and I know God know, but I was just talking about it, and I was like, he was bullying me and ran me from my home with my child, attacking me, and he was bullying me, attacking me in my home, saying the police was letting him do it, and then was kicking holes in the walls in my home, punching volleyball holes, destroying the flat screen, hitting me and my child. And he ran and kept fleeing to Cynthia O'Vera's home on Amarillo Street in Conroe, Texas. And they got them rolling up, trying to bang music loud to try to get over my testimony of what Austin was doing to me in my home. And this is what the Americans are trying to do for white supremacy, because they don't want people to know what Austin was doing to me and my child. And they trying to create distractions here now that I'm putting out the truth about what's going on, and I'm about to tell y'all what God said about me not being guilty for these charges, and they trying to make all this noise and distractions. So I said Austin was bullying me in my home with bullying my son. So he was also bullying my son as well. Like, okay, her family don't care about her, been with her for years. We know they don't care about her. Cynthia and Joseph is trying to set her up for me, and the police is racist. And he like, I got everybody on my side. I can just abuse my black baby mother in this apartment and abuse my son, and nobody is going to help them. And he continued to do it and continued to flee to Cynthia's. And I continued to call the police on him. And Austin said that the police were saying that he did not, they were saying that they would not make him leave my home when I said that I wanted to press charges on him for continuing to do this. And they said that after 72 hours of him being out of prison in my home, that they could not make him leave my home after he was charged for assault, and even tried to threaten to arrest me off of something that Cynthia said from her home, saying that Austin fled to her house and that he had a scratch on his body, and that she felt like they should arrest me, and she was having the police department come and say that I could not press charges on him, or they would have to arrest me from my home for pressing the charges, because he was claiming that he had a scratch on him. And I didn't hurt Austin, and I never hit him. And so he ran me from my home September 18, 2018, with my son in my arms, because he kept trying to kidnap my son, and he kept trying to attack him in the home while he was attacking me. And he was attacking me in the house with my baby in my arms, knocking me into the walls and knocking me over the furniture in my home. And I thought that I had a miscarriage all the way with this baby, that it came out, because I was bleeding so much that I thought that it must have came out and passed out through my vaginal area where I was bleeding. And I didn't know that I was still pregnant, because I had taken a pregnancy test after I started bleeding, and it said that it was negative. But I still felt something moving in me, and I told Austin, and he was picking me up and slamming me while I was bleeding, and telling him that I was bleeding, and continuing to attack me in my bedroom. And the day of the shooting, he started attacking me again, and attacking me with my son in my arms. And I ended up getting my gun and putting it in my purse and running from my home and screaming for the police, because he was trying to stop me from calling the police. He was stopping me from calling the police again inside of my apartment September 18, 2018. And he had been out of prison for 10 weeks and had done all this to me and my son over that 10-week period in my home.
home, and I called Joseph and told him that he was abusing me. I called the Conroe police and told them. I called Cynthia O'Vera and told her. I called a woman a daughter's hair that I was doing her hair out of my home, and called her and told her that he was in my home assaulting me and that I didn't know what to do. And she said, call the police again, and I did, and they threatened to arrest me and still drove off, refusing to allow me to press charges because Cynthia said she was scared that Austin would be killed if he went back to prison because of his behavior and the other inmates not really wanting to tolerate that stuff. They almost broke his neck the first time while he was in prison, and he had to be put in protective custody. So Cynthia was enabling him to abuse me in my home and working with the racist Conroe Police Department to cover up that he was abusing me and my little boy inside of my home, and that I was pregnant by him again. And so I ran with my child outside, asking my neighbors, screaming to my neighbors to call 911 from down the street, and they just watched as Austin tried to throw me down my stairs with my son, and I begged him not to do that, and he let me go, and I ran, and I still had my son in my arms, the purse on my arm with the gun in it, and my phone was in my purse, but I could not get to my phone as quickly as he was trying to attack me, and I didn't pull out the gun either, and I snuck the gun into my purse, and Austin ran me from my stairs, ran me through my front yard, chased me down Everett Street next to my home, and I started waving down a white woman as he was grabbing me, trying to throw me down into a puddle of water in the street with my son at 22 months old in my arm, the purse on my arm, my other arm, and the gun was in my purse, and he was still trying to throw me down in a puddle of water in front of Paradise Micheladas in Conroe, Texas. It's a restaurant that was across the street from my home. There were two restaurants, and then I flagged down a white woman. She was on the passenger side, and she had a white male in the front passenger, and Austin had me hemmed up by my dress and was about to put me down in the middle of the street. And I asked the white woman, I flagged her down screaming and said, please help us. And she said, I don't want to get involved. She rolled down the window a little bit and said, I don't want to get involved, and rolled the window up. She said, I'll call 911, and rolled the window up and drove by my apartment and started getting on the phone. And Austin ran from attacking me in the streets and ran to my home, my apartment, and took off some of the clothing that he had and changed his shirt, and then started coming back towards my direction to attack me. And I started to run, but I was tired, and I walked into the Baytown Seafood restaurant with my little boy in my arms, and I walked past the elderly people in the front of the restaurant because I didn't want him hurting anybody. And I went to the back of the restaurant, and there was a man sitting there who was eating, and he had on work attire for the restaurant. He worked there, and I asked this man, I said, can you please dial 911? My child's father is attacking me outside. And he said yes. And there was a girl back there eating food, I think was his daughter, and she was like a teenager, and I had my son in my arms, and the man started dialing 911, and I hid behind the man with my son in my arms in the back of the restaurant. And Austin came into the restaurant as the man was getting off the phone with 911. He had called them and reported what I asked him to report, that Austin was attacking me outside and with my son. And Austin came into the Baytown Seafood restaurant, and he went into the restroom and went around the old people in the front and looked around and left out of the front of the restaurant without noticing that I was in the back of the restaurant hiding behind this male employee that I asked for help. And then Austin came right back into the restaurant, and he spotted me in the back of the restaurant, and he started running towards me, charging towards me to attack me. And I put my son down next to me because I could not put my son down while he was trying to attack me in the streets. And I held my son in my arms while he was trying to throw me down into a puddle of water when I was flagging down the white woman and her male companion who was driving. And Austin started attacking me in the restaurant and knocking me into the booths where there were butter knives, and I was afraid that he would pick up a knife and try to stab me during the attack. And the man that dialed 911 got behind Austin, and he started trying to restrain him, and Austin was behaving violently and continuing to attack me, and I started to fend for myself and try to fight him off with the man trying to restrain him from behind, and we were successful with getting him off of me, and the man was still trying to restrain him from behind. And then Austin, he snatched my son up and started slinging my son upside down, and my son eyes started to bulge, and he was screaming upside down like this. And he was hanging him by his foot and being restrained by the man from the restaurant. And my son's tonsil, that little thing in the back of your throat, his eyes were like that, and he was screaming and crying, and it was shaking. The tonsil thing, the thing in the back of his throat, it was shaking like this as he was screaming, and I saw it just vibrating. And I was trying to get my son from him, and the man, I was like in the front and on the side trying to get my son from him, and the man was in the back of Austin trying to restrain him and help me get my son from him. And we were pretty much going in circles really fast trying to hurry and get the baby from him. And I had put the gun on the table because I knew what he was doing to me and my son, and I didn't want to use the gun, and I thought the man could help us. And I told the man, I have a gun, I don't want to use it, while I was trying to get my baby, and he was behind him, and Austin was doing all this while the man was behind him. And I was trying to get my baby. And I thought the baby in me was dead that I'm pregnant with, because I was bleeding while he was doing this. And the pregnancy test that came back negative after I started bleeding. So I thought I miscarried. Like, I thought it was past, that it was out of me.